This is MongoSlade. Today we're going to be talking about Spider-Man No Way Home, which is the third installment of the Marvel Cinematic Universe centered Spider-Man movies featuring Tom Holland. For starters, it was Homecoming, then Far From Home, now No Way Home. So the movie takes bits and pieces of a lot of different comic book Spider-Man related material, such as his deal with Mephisto, the Insidious Six, Enter the Spider-Verse, and a lot of other Spider-Man related comics and media, and brings it all together in this one movie. And I feel like it was very well done. Though I feel that Enter the Spider-Verse did the same concept just a little bit better with the animation and everything. It just felt fresher. Here, it was still very well done. So, just to catch up, people who are maybe give you a bit of a refresher. Let's go through the movie. So, what is this movie about? Well, the entire crux of the movie is that Peter Parker has been outed as Spider-Man by Mysterio at the end of Far From Home. So now his life is tattered up and in ruins, and he wants to try to fix it. His friends are suffering around him because the world knows who he is. So now they having trouble getting into college. They need security wherever they go. They're having under investigation from the FBI and all this kind of stuff. So he wants to put the toothpaste back in the tube. So he goes to Doctor Strange, and he then hesitates as he's telling Doctor Strange, "I wanted to make sure that it's like nobody knows who Spider-Man is." And then he realizes it will affect his relationship with Mary Jane. And then he says, "Well, I'm sorry, not Mary Jane. I mean Michelle Jones, his MJ," and change that relationship. So he decides he doesn't want to do that, and he's interrupting, the spell. And interrupting the spell instead brings all of the people who knows who Spider-Man is into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So then you get Doctor Octopus, you get the Lizard, you get Electro, you get the two other Spider-Man, you get Sandman, all these guys dumped into this movie. It was a great gimmick, awesome gimmick. And from there, the movie is about getting all the villains back to their universes without them dying, because all of the villains are brought into the Marvel Cinematic Universe just moments before they died. So Dr. Octopus is completely and totally poisoned by his tendrils, and he's a maniac. Lizard is a lizard who wants to turn other people into lizards. Electro is obsessed with power and constantly wanting to get into contact with this new power source that's in this universe. Sandman isn't a villain; he just kind of wants to go home, because he thinks he's going to find his daughter. And the Green Goblin is crazy as ever, and still wants to do crazy Green Goblin stuff. And so when Tom Holland realized that these guys are going to get sent back to their universe and they're going to die, he decides to kind of go against Doctor Strange. If Doctor Strange wants to send these guys back, it's their fate. And I love that was a nice little conflict in this movie, because it led to a pretty fun fight scene between Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. That if it's their fate to die, so be it. Because it kind of tells you that the character of Doctor Strange is less sentimental than Spider-Man is. And it makes sense for Spider-Man to be very sentimental, because that's what the character is. And so he's like, look, if they die, they die. That's not our problem. And Spider-Man kind of goes against Doctor Strange, steals his thingamajig, and is trying to help the villains. He's trying to cure them. Interesting piece of business here. It's the Lizard who tells him, when you try to fix people, it almost always goes wrong. Because the Lizard, one of his things was he wanted to make people better by making them lizards, and it was crazy. So it kind of turned Spider-Man into this guy who's trying to physically reform the villains. And while it makes sense that he will want to reform some of the villains, you still have to say, like, okay, he's kind of doing this stuff maybe a little bit by force, maybe. But it was a nice little conflict to put into this movie. So what ends up happening is the absolute maniac Green Goblin cannot be fixed, and he doesn't want to be fixed, and he can only pretend that he wants to be fixed because he wants to find out what's going on. So he ends up finding out what's going on, and Green Goblin does Green Goblin stuff. In the big battle with the Green Goblin, Aunt May ends up dying. This leads that Tom Holland's Spider-Man is completely bereft and it actually continues the character arc that sort of Tobey Maguire Spider-Man had. That is the actual Spider-Man origin story. Is that early in the movie, Aunt May is trying to get Tom Holland Spider-Man to care about this particular subject. He's like, nope, not my problem. I don't care. Later in the movie, she ends up dying and tells him, with great power comes great responsibility. Because there's no Ben Parker in this universe, she is the one who delivers the immortal lines to Spider-Man and gives him the great boost, the Peter Parker curse, as some people have decided to call it. And of course, it's bullshit because they could have had an Uncle Ben in this movie, but whatever. In any event, he is completely guilt riddled. Tom Holland Spider-Man is, because his actions led to Aunt May dying, and it's all because he was screwing around with the multiverse and trying to help these villains, and found out that he really couldn't. Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, they're introduced. Pretty cool scene. I don't like how they were stacked on top of each other like that. How Andrew Garfield was kind of proving that he was Peter Parker, and then just merely a minute or two later, we introduced Tobey Maguire, and to me is probably a better Peter Parker than the other two. And I like Tom Holland. I think Andrew Garfield really got upstaged here. They meet Tom Holland Spider-Man for the first time on top of the roof as he's crying over his Aunt May. Then they share stories. Peter Parker, Tobey Maguire Peter Parker, tells the story of Uncle Ben dying. You got Andrew Garfield Spider-Man. He's telling the story of Gwen Stacy. And they all realize that, what they call the Parker luck in comic books, that every time Spider-Man does something, it usually affects not Peter Parker, but the people around him. And that's just part of being a hero. And, they give him the big pep talk to get him back into the fight. So now he can actually go out and save the day. So after that, they kind of have a little bit of conversation about all of their adventures. Tobey Maguire is talking about how he fought an alien that was covered in black goop. And Andrew Garfield is talking about a man in a rhino suit. And Tom Holland is talking about the Avengers, but nobody knows who any of these people are, because there is no Avengers in the Maguire universe or the Garfield universe. Like there's no Rhino in the Maguire universe or in the Holland universe, and there's no Venom. Not only not in this movie where it would make sense for there to be Venom, but there's also no Venom in the Garfield universe. There's no Venom in the Holland universe. So it all shows you that they kind of have three different pathways. And I really enjoyed this particular trio of characters because it does show you the three layers of Spider-Man. Though I do believe Enter the Spider-Verse did this better by introducing Peter Parker as an older mentor to Miles Morales and guiding him through the movie. Here, because Tom Holland had already had a mentor in Iron Man, he just needed somebody to give him a pep talk to bring him back to reality. And in doing that, who better than other versions of himself? So in this movie, you had the older Spider-Man, more reflective, a little bit sweeter. Almost everybody likes Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man. And he kind of comes in, he's the adult Spider-Man, like the true, mature Spider-Man. Then you got Andrew Garfield, who's less mature. He's a little bit moodier, a little bit more snarky. He's kind of in his early 20s. And then you have the late teenager Spider-Man, who's, he's kind of talkative, more like how Peter Parker really is in like if you saw the cartoon, or if you read like some of the young Spider-Man comic books, he's kind of like the Tom Holland character, the hyperverbalism, him just constantly talking, constantly cracking jokes, the youthful exuberance of Spider-Man. That's what Tom Holland captures. He captured that very well. So each one of them, shows that you can have the same character, and they're very different characterizations, but they were all on point. Like this specifically because it goes to show what I've been saying before about people not being easily replaceable. That each Peter Parker is a product of his own experiences. He is what he cared about, and what was taken away from him was different. Even though I am kind of pissy about there being no Uncle Ben in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it makes sense because there was Uncle Ben in the Tobey Maguire universe, and there was no Uncle Ben in the Andrew Garfield universe. So, what was it? I don't believe there was. I don't remember. I haven't seen those Amazing Spider-Man movies in a long time. So it's been a while. I may trip up on some of that stuff. But so it makes sense that we have different experiences, different outlooks on all coming from the same, virtually the same character, which is Peter Parker, Spider-Man, but they're all different Spider-Man from different universes. So they have different experiences. And I still believe, I say it again, Enter the Spider-Verse probably did it better, you know. But I still enjoyed the characters. And I enjoyed the characterizations of the villains too, because they were memorable. They were the way that I remember them. Even though I wasn't thrilled about Electro and the characterization of Electro being this sort of loser who now gets his hands on power, and now he's going to, make sure people can never forget him and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, I wasn't thrilled about it, but they continued that here. They showed some continuity, which is a good thing. To continue with that continuity, Dr. Octopus, once he was cured of his tendril poisoning, went back to being a decent guy. Good stuff. I like that. Sandman, not really being a bad dude, but kind of being irritable and wanting what he wanted. And all he cared about was going home. So he'd fight anybody if it meant going home to his daughter, because that's all he cared about. Okay, consistent with the character. And of course, Willem Dafoe steals the show as the Green Goblin, absolutely psychotic. And it was really fun to watch him and Tom Holland Spider-Man duke it out and have really fun. That fight scene near the end was really fun. I really enjoyed that. So the movie ends as, Doctor Strange sees that Tom Holland's thing is working, that he is able to cure some of the villains, and because he was able to reform Dr. Octopus, but it's making it worse. As in now there's more people coming into the universe, and Doctor Strange is trying to hold all these people back and saying, look, it's not possible. You gotta get rid of these people. So of course this leads to everybody has to go back to their own universe. We have to mind wipe everybody so that nobody can cross universes again. This brings another great conflict in the film. Another for people who like to write stories. The more conflict, the better. It doesn't have to be fighting. It has to be characters going through something. This was a great central conflict in this movie, is that Pete ended up in this whole debacle because he wanted to put his identity back in the tube without sacrificing his relationship to MJ. So in this movie, he has to sacrifice his relationship with MJ. So now he has to tell her, you're going to forget who I am, but I promise I'm going to tell you. I promise you I'm going to tell you who I am. And they have the big kiss and everybody's happy. Oh, it's so sweet. Doctor Strange, boom, does the spell. Everybody's mind is wiped. Peter Parker then is going to go to MJ's job and tell her who he is, because now he knows she doesn't know who he is. And he's eavesdropping, MJ talking to his fat friend. I don't remember the kid's name. And in any event, he finds out she's about to go to college and she's all on the ball. Everything is working out. And he begins to see that not only does she not know who he is as he's talking to her, she doesn't know who he is, but maybe consider that his life is better off without him. And so he doesn't tell her, and he just kind of leaves, breaking his word to her. And to be quite honest, it was a gut-wrenching finish to the story, because, and this is where we get the sort of, it comes from the deal he made with Mephisto in the comic books, where he had to sacrifice his marriage in order to bring Aunt May back to life. So he doesn't get Aunt May back to life in this movie. At least I don't remember that she came back. It's just that most people, no, she didn't, because he went to her gravesite at the end, and Happy Hogan didn't know who he was. Very odd that he would know Aunt May but didn't know Peter Parker at all. Strange. In any event, when people are often sort of suicidal, they will often think things like, your life is better off without me. So I don't like that being validated in the movie, but there was no other way to end it. It's like, what other way could you possibly have done it? If you tell her I'm Peter Parker and I'm Spider-Man, what happens? Well, sure you are. Sure you're Spider-Man. And you just happen to walk into this coffee shop and just tell me randomly that you're Spider-Man. And they have no relationship. Now that she doesn't know who he is anymore, they have no relationship. Therefore, who is he keeping his word to? He's keeping his word to a MJ that doesn't exist anymore. And that's an interesting development. And so it's like, did he lie really? Did you really lie if the other person doesn't know that you lied? It's like, yeah, you did. You didn't tell the truth. But would telling the truth, if you could hurt them and destroy their lives or whatever, is telling the truth the right thing to do? And it's like, well, I don't think it would have had the same reaction this time as it would have the last time, but I don't think it would have done him any good to tell her that he's Spider-Man. But that's kind of how we end the movie. And I enjoyed it, and I thought it was a great film. It took tidbits of a lot of the different Spider-Man stories and brought it all together, which made it great fan service for the young people, for people my age, in the mid-30s, and also for people who are a little bit younger, who just saw Enter the Spider-Verse a year or two ago and saw the multiverse of how many different Peter Parkers there could be, how many different Spider-Man there could be. And it was a great melding of all of these things together. And it was really fun, and that's the key, is fun. I personally am not a big fan of Spider-Man being involved in multiversal madness and there being 3 different Spider-Man and all that kind of stuff. But I'm Spider-Man should be a street level hero. And when he's going into space and all that kind of shit, I'm like, okay, he's out of his element. Like when he's messing around with magic and all that kind of stuff, I'm like, okay, Spider-Man doesn't really do that. Spider-Man beats up muggers and bank robbers and gangsters and that kind of stuff, So, it took Spider-Man, but this version of Spider-Man has already been to space. He's already fought evil alien emperors with magic gems. He's already done that stuff. So we're beyond muggers at this point. So I enjoyed the movie. I enjoyed all of the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies. The Mysterio movie was okay. I don't know if I finished it completely. I know I've seen it, but I don't know if I sat and watched it all the way through with a fine-tooth comb like I did with Homecoming or with the Maguire Spider-Man movies. Where does this fit? It's definitely better than Spider-Man 3. And it's certainly better than Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2. It's definitely a very good Spider-Man flick. I think Enter the Spider-Verse did this same concept better. But I also think that it was more ambitious than Enter the Spider-Verse was. The most daring thing Enter the Spider-Verse did was introduce Miles Morales as Spider-Man. It was the central character of the story. But he had already been around in the comics for a long time, so that really wasn't that ambitious of a goal. In this one, they were trying to continue the Marvel Cinematic Universe while also doing, and at least touching on several different storylines from within Marvel Comics. So to me, this feels like it was the farewell to Tom Holland Spider-Man, because now nobody knows who he is, which means the Avengers can't know who he is. So you have to ask the question, what is going to end up happening? Is there going to be a 4th Spider-Man movie? Now, I do know that Tom Holland is supposed to continue being Spider-Man, but something tells me that he is basically just going to be a vehicle in which to introduce Miles Morales into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So if you like Tom Holland as Spider-Man, my conspiracy theory is he's going to end up dead within the next movie or two, or at least in the next whatever big film they're going to be doing. They're probably going to kill him off, and it's going to be Miles Morales from that point forward. Which is really sad, because Spider-Man 2099, I think it's Miguel O'Hara. He was the first Hispanic Spider-Man. Nobody cares about him. He wasn't even in Enter the Spider-Verse. Nobody even talks about him. he was a non-white Spider-Man. What about him? Even Alchemax, which is what Miles Morales was fighting in Enter the Spider-Verse, that was the villains for the Spider-Man 2099, wasn't it? Alchemax? Nah, I'm too much of a nerd. They had to have Spider Pig in it. I could have got rid of that guy. But I guess that's kind of want to have all the different universes. It's going to be infinite universes, infinite kinds of things. But it still would have been fun, you know. Maybe they'll continue along down this line, but I think they definitely going to end up killing off Tom Holland because I've already heard they're talking about bringing in Ironheart. They already gave Captain Falcon the shield. I didn't watch that show, by the way. I also didn't watch Hawkeye, and I know that Kate Bishop is back, and now she's in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I am not watching that. To be quite honest, I know people are probably going to be asking, especially if you listen this far into this video. I have not watched anything Marvel since the Endgame. So I didn't watch none of the TV shows. I didn't watch Black Widow. I didn't see Eternals. I didn't watch anything after Endgame. As far as I was concerned, the Marvel Cinematic Universe ended with Endgame. The only reason I watched this movie is because it was spoiled. This is the one time spoilers actually got me to watch something. Because this movie was spoiled for me, I actually went to go see it. So this movie was really fun. It's standalone. You have to have seen at least the Spider-Man movies to understand it. So that's a big problem. But they assume everybody has. You know, they assumed everybody's seen the Maguire Spider-Man movies and the Andrew Garfield movies and the first two Tom Holland movies. You didn't need to watch any of the Avengers. You know, maybe you did to understand who Happy Hogan is. But there were no Avengers in this movie. There weren't any other Avengers, which of course is weird because you've got a crazy guy with tendrils, you know, destroying the city, and you've got Green Goblin flying around on a scooter blowing stuff up, and like no Captain America, no Hawkeye, no Captain Marvel. Where is everybody? You know, so that's the problem with having a shared universe because you do open up those questions like, where are all these people? You've had 10 years of heroes and you're constantly making movies about these different heroes, and now this guy is dealing with some really hardcore multiversal stuff and he's only a teenager. Where is everybody? You know, like, why Doctor Strange didn't make a phone call like, look, we got an issue here. You know, like there's some bad dudes doing bad dude stuff over here. Come on. But you have to kind of suspend your disbelief and just say it's a fun movie. Definitely worth your time, and it's especially if you saw all the other Spider-Man movies. It was a great homage to Spider-Man. All three different Spider-Man. It showed what made them all unique, what all made them all interesting, and it added upon their legacies too. Can't beat it. Only problem I say is it felt like the big fat ending for Tom Holland. So if you don't like Miles Morales, get ready. Get ready, because it's coming. I see it coming already. But let me know what you guys thought of this film. Like, share, and subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later, man. Peace.